At the outset, let me say this. I'm not someone who holds a great deal of truck, usually, with most things that 2GB broadcaster Alan Jones says. However, in my mind there is absolutely no doubt that he's on the right track as he spearheads a national campaign against coal seam gas mining. Quite rightly, Jones sees the urgent need to ensure Australia's food security, which also includes restricting foreign ownership of Australian agricultural lands. Jones has read the political tea leaves far better than any dunce in Canberra, or their even more inane and inert counterparts in New South Wales and Queensland, and his two public forums on the issue to date in Oakey in Queensland and last Thursday in Gunnedah in New South Wales clearly shows that. People from all ends of the political spectrum are supporting Jones's caravan as he rightly campaigns to keep mining companies from raping and plundering Australian land and foreign countries such as Qatar and China from buying swathes of Australian farms at will. Of course, common sense, a rare commodity indeed in the chambers of parliaments around this country, would dictate that the Australian governments have an obligation to ensure that Australians can eat clean food, drink clean water, can irrigate crops with clean water, and we can continue to produce the clean, green and healthy agricultural products that this country has been globally renowned for. This is Australia, not China. And even the majority of Chinese do not want to eat the toxin-ridden local produce or the heavy metal-laden farmed fish and prawns that is produced in many parts of their country. That is why they are keen on buying up agricultural Australian properties. It is interesting to note that people like Drew Hutton from the Lock the Gate movement, Simon Sheikh from Get Up, the Greens senators, Independent Senator Nick Xenophon, not to mention farmers who previously supported the coalition, are now aligning themselves with Jones on this issue. This is because he's right. Former Australian fast bowler Carl Rackerman has already announced that he will run at the next Queensland election on an anti-coal seam gas issue, and he'll probably win the seat he contests. It really is that simple. If the Coalition and the ALP want to retain one non-metropolitan seat in future elections, then they have to start addressing this issue. Because if sane and sensible candidates are put up that campaign on this issue, they will win many rural electorates. It was interesting to note that speakers at the rally in Gunnedah, who ranged from your everyday farmer to a retired Supreme Court Justice, all have despaired of outcomes from the political process and the political obligations being foisted on rural and regional Australia by both the ALP and the Coalition. Both major parties are gonzo with these people. It was also salient to note at the Gunnedah Forum that a good deal of anger and distrust was aimed squarely toward the Chinese agricultural buyout and major Chinese mining companies such as Shenhua. One speaker declared that there will be those who call the approach racist, which of course is simply a nonsense. Try going into the bush at the moment and tell people you're attempting to source something for a Chinese purchaser, and you'll be lucky if they even want to give you a quote. The reason for that's simple. The majority of Chinese companies have not proven to be fair dinkum in many of their business dealings in rural and regional Australia, and in many ways they've brought this distrust on themselves. It simply stands to reason that on a planet where food security is becoming a palpable issue for governments on a daily basis, that Australia is far better placed than most countries. Yet we have governments in Australia addicted to mining taxes who are prepared to put this in jeopardy. We also have governments who whistle and look out the window of their taxpayer-funded charter flights as more of our country's food bowl falls into the hand of foreigners. A fact that is lost on the major parties is that it does not matter how much coal seam gas you extract or how many hectares you turn into toxic fly ash pits, it all pales into insignificance if your population cannot eat. Even the top end of towners who waddle from their office to Machiavelli's or Glass for lunch in the Sydney CBD they go there to get fed. They don't eat junk bonds for an entree or subprime mortgages for a main meal. Otherwise they would be unable to maintain their mostly pear-shaped figures. I am sure the coal seam gas issue will galvanise hundreds of thousands of Australians, and hopefully we will see an alliance of some description coagulate to run candidates in all Houses of Parliament in upcoming elections. If this doesn't happen, law reform and protection for Australian agricultural lands won't happen. Unceremoniously dumping some politicians from both sides out the back door of New South Wales Parliament into Hospital Road and sending a few packing from other parliaments is the only language that both major parties understand. The parlous state of both political parties was not lost on several speakers at the Gunnedah Forum, and the disdain and distrust they have for them was quite resounding. But while ever the politicians feel quarantined from threat, while ever they can depend on major mining companies using the law to quell the protest and protect their hides, they'll do diddly squat. Sure, Liberal Senator Bill Heffernan has been aligned with Jones on this issue, and he is currently chairing a Senate inquiry into the aspects of food security, coal seam gas mining and foreign ownership of Australian agricultural land. But in a weird quirk of fate, the good senator's best chance of effecting change may come from the committee's recommendations being adopted by the current Labor government, due to pressure from the Country Independents, the Greens and the very working nature of the current Parliament. To add further to the political irony, if Labor insiders like Troy Bramston, Graham Richardson and co are correct, and a leadership move is made by Kevin Rudd before or just after Christmas, then this will only give Heffernan further traction. I know Bill, and he's told me personally that he has a good relationship with Rudd, so the stars may align politically and afford him an opportunity he may not otherwise have. It would seem highly unlikely that any real change would be effected under a coalition government, as the right wing of the party is firmly in the corner of the mining companies and is very unlikely to affect protection mechanisms for Australia's food bowl. Most will recall how quickly opposition leader Tony Abbott backpedalled after he made a statement that farmers should have rights and agricultural lands should be protected. He went backwards the very next day much quicker than his early morning cycling exploits go forward. He would have had every right-wing Conservative on the phone banging the mining drum to him. Similarly, the ALP does not seem inclined to change the status quo, but the dependence it has on the Independents and the Greens currently place it in a vulnerable position which may actually force it to act. Only recently, Government Minister Craig Emerson was at pains to dismiss call for protection of Australian agricultural lands by saying Australia welcomes foreign investment. Change comes from the ballot box, and Australians will overwhelmingly vote to support their way of life, their right to expect clean and healthy food, and the right to expect that they should not be eating the skerricks of food that China and the Middle East do not want. Change simply can't be effected without politicians being threatened, or better still, the major parties suffering seat losses. Failure to be able to hold these mugwumps accountable on the floor of parliaments allows them the opportunity to pay lip service to the electorate on the issue and then come up with some quaint excuse as to why they cannot act. One of the speakers at Gunnedah was spot on when she highlighted the political corruption and the fact that politicians had forgotten they were actually servants of the people. These people protesting in their hundreds in Gunnedah and Oakey are not left-wing loonies, nor are they right-wing plotters. They're everyday Australians from the broader political spectrum who have simply had enough. I only hope Jones was right when he promised the forum in Gunnedah that the rape and pillaging of Australian agricultural lands, quote, won't happen.